Welcome to Good Game, the show for gamers, by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo. Coming up on the show this week, the latest adventure game from Jane Jensen, Bring Matter.
It's a steam vent.
Plus some big buffy blokes get their punch on in WWE All Stars.
And we buff some ghosts, blast some aliens, steer a swarm, and punch a dinosaur in our downloadable game roundup. But first, can you guess the game for this week?
What you got there?
Why, it's this week's prize, Hex. Some game manuals we had in the office that we no longer have the games for, such as Activision Anthology, over 45 radical games in one. No longer needing instruction now, because you can win this book.
So no actual games then?
No actual games then. Ah, pressure cooker. Underrated.
Good game!
The creator of the video game cartridge has died at the age of 70. Jerry Lawson was the chief engineer of the Fairchild Channel F games console, the world's very first cartridge-based game system released in 1976. 26 video cards were released for the system before Atari stole the spotlight with their 2600 a year later. Lawson was a member of the Homebrew Computer Club in Silicon Valley, which also spawned Apple's Steve Jobs. PopCap Games, the studio responsible for blockbuster casual games such as Peggle, Bejeweled and Plants vs. Zombies, has founded a new studio called Fourth and Battery. The studio will be dedicated to creating experimental games. However, their first game, Unpleasant Horse for the iOS, has been rejected by Apple due to its mature content. Fourth and Battery is appealing this decision and has resubmitted the game with a higher rating. The recent fan-made Streets of Rage remake has been pulled from the internet following a request from Sega. The studio responsible for the remake, Bomber Games, has pulled all links from their site and has asked fans not to redistribute the game until the matter has been resolved. A downloadable game called Active Tactics Simulator is using gamers' brainpower to help train anti-submarine drones. The project is the brainchild of the United States Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, or DARPA. DARPA will then crowdsource the most effective tactics used by gamers to train the autonomous software that will power the real-life drones. The word LOL, or LOL, has been officially added to the Oxford English Dictionary. LOL is defined as an interjection used chiefly in electronic communications to draw attention to a joke or humorous statement or to express amusement. The first use of the word can be traced back to Canadian Wayne Pearson, who wrote the first ever LOL in reply to a joke in an internet discussion forum back in the 1980s. The winners of the 2010 Australian IT Journalism Awards, or Lizzies, have been announced, with the overall winner for Best Title going to IT News. Kotaku AU walked away with the award for Best Gaming Coverage, and Kotaku AU editor Mark Serrell scored the nod for Best Gaming Journalist. And, what's this? Good Game also won the award for Best Video Program. WWE All Stars is the latest in THQ's long line of licensed wrestling games, but this is quite a departure from the usual, embracing more of an arcade sensibility.
Yeah, funnily enough, by moving away from the slower-paced technical fighting of SmackDown versus Raw and going for more over-the-top moves, they've actually made a wrestling game that's more suited to the theatrics of wrestling.
Making his way to the ring, weighing 275 pounds, from Heart Unknown, the Ultimate Warrior!
There's no need for stamina bars or realistic physics. This is all about the spectacle and the melodrama, and giant men with ridiculous names hitting each other with chairs.
And bashes him with a chair. How can one man take so much punishment?
The new controls, while fairly simple, have some decent depth. Each fighter has a light and heavy attack, as well as a light and heavy grapple. These can be combined together like a traditional fighting game, but there's no moves list here, so you really have to experiment to work out the most effective combos.
You can counter enemy attacks and grapples with a quick tap of the right bumper. The timing here is imperative, but if you get it right, it reverses their move into one of your own, which is pretty satisfying. Stringing together attacks charges a meter that allows you to use signature moves. These attacks do a lot of damage and help charge up the finisher bar, which then let you pull off a finishing move. fighter is different, but they all fall into a few set categories. There are the giants, who can't be knocked down by normal attacks, the high flyers, who can launch high flying attacks, and brawlers, who can move about the ring faster.
He just knocked his teeth out!
There are some decent options here, from cage matches to single brawls, to eliminations or tornado tag matches. But the meat of the single player is the Path of Champions mode, 3 storylines based around taking a wrestler through to the championship.
I think the Undertaker storyline is the most fun, Hex.
Welcome! Oh, yes! Welcome to my funeral parlor!
There's only a few cutscenes with Paul Bearer whining away into the mic as Taker builds a coffin to bury you and your career, but there's enough theatrics to make it amusing.
Rest in peace.
You can take any of the 30 wrestlers in the roster through this mode, or you can create your own fighter. The character creation mode isn't quite as robust as it has been in other WWE games, but it still does the job. Aside from creating the look of the character, you can choose movesets and finishes from other established fighters. Most of the finishes are locked to begin with though, so you'll have to come back to your character later and add the moves that you want.
Hex, I think this game will upset some of the series stalwarts who, have grown to love that sim-like approach that SmackDown vs. Raw does every year. But there's one mode here I think any long-term wrestling fan will get a lot out of. Fantasy Warfare mode pits similar wrestlers past and present against each other to see who is the best of all time. There's nothing like a permed mullet to get you G'd up for a bit of biff.
When you look at Mr. Perfect, what you see is what you get, and what you're getting is absolutely perfect.
I think personality-wise, none of the newer wrestlers stand up to some of those old-school superstars. The Miz is really no equivalent of Mr. Perfect, and there's no way Kofi Kingston is the modern Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. I understand they had to fit modern wrestlers in to appeal to newer fans, but this is a serious lineup of douchebags.
Way down the aisle, the man, the myth, the legend, the Cowboy.
I think they're going for a pick-up-and-play accessible type of game here, Hex, but they don't quite get there in my opinion. The lack of any kind of tutorial means it's a bit daunting for a non-wrestling fan, and you're going to have to spend hours and hours just learning the precise timing of the counters for every fighter.
Well, I don't know, I think it's definitely not as accessible as it looks, but you can still sort of pick up and play and get a feel for some of those moves without too much trouble.
It's just that split-second timing, that one-button press which can make or break a fight, and I'm just not fond of that as a mechanic. Also, the AI seems to be able to counter my counters at will, and that makes it even harder.
Not massacred and taken to the mat with a snap mare.
The camera doesn't help either. When you're fighting left to right like a traditional fighting game, it works fine, but as soon as you start to circle each other, things get a bit muddled. It's really hard to judge distance, and the chunky proportions of the fighters doesn't help.
No, I thought the character models looked pretty good, but I think you might be right about some of the proportions. Some of the wrestlers seem to have arms like a T-Rex, so the range of attacks is never as long as you think it should be. I also noticed some clipping problems with the models having to clip through each other to pull off some moves. Anyway, final thoughts?
I like the arcadey idea of All Stars. It took me back to the 90s and some of those fun wrestling games I used to play with my friends on the couch. And this is still fun with friends, but the cheap AI and twitchy fighting means I probably won't go back to it. I'm giving it 6 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I don't know, I think by bringing things back to a more arcadey level, THQ have made one of their best fighting games in years. There is a little bit of trouble with the camera from time to time, but I don't think it's enough to detract from some of that big goofy fun, so I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Oh, knock the hell out! He could be feeling a little embarrassed after he eventually wakes up from that.
Good game.
It's time now to hand the soapbox over to all of you fanatic fanboys and hassling haters to see what your thoughts were on the Final Fantasy series.
Indeed it is. Let's start by looking at the results of our web poll. Fanboy or hater, which are you when it comes to the Final Fantasy series? With well over 6,000 votes counted, it seems like apathy wins the day, with 37% of you being utterly indifferent. Fanboys right behind at 36%, and the haters trailing with 27% of the vote.
It's interesting though, I noticed a lot of people who said that they were fanboys went to great lengths to point out that they were also haters and vice versa. So let's have a read of this comment from Daft667. 60% fanboy, 40% hater. IMO, the series has fallen somewhat since it started. Final Fantasy 13 I think was good, but it wasn't a good Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 14 is a mess, lol. I think the problem is that the series hasn't managed to evolve.
And there was this from Dorinum. It's too hard to have such a clear-cut definition as fan person or hater for Final Fantasy, as I'm sure there are many like me who believe that the once mighty franchise steadily lost its way since the utterly brilliant Final Fantasy X. All consequent releases were fiascos for different reasons. I remember putting too much stock into the opinions of two starry-eyed reviewers, yes, I am referring to you, Barjo and Hex, and rushing out to purchase the latest installment of Final Fantasy on their glowing recommendations.
Hang on, that's not right.
Yes, I think you might have had your fanboy ears on there, because we both gave Final Fantasy XIII 7 rubber chickens each.
I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
No, it won't be remembered as a classic. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens, which is hardly a glowing recommendation. It's more of a slightly hesitant recommendation.
Yeah, and I believe I even called the game one big grind. For me, FF13 was just a lot of grinding. Anyway, continue.
Final Fantasy XIII was a dismal failure because it was a soulless marketing release having none of the imagination or heart of the previous games. They had a legacy of a run, but it has come to an end. If I had to choose a camp, I'd say hater, because I hate compromising art for profit, and that's exactly what they did.
We actually got some great video submissions this time, so let's see what they have to say.
It was the game that really got me into 8-hour play sessions, you know, all day, just grinding and collecting things and killing things. It was unbelievable.
So yeah, I think this is going to sum it up.
What's that? It's Good Games Fanboy vs. Haters Final Fantasy thing. Can you upload it for me? Finally, a chance to talk about how great Final Fantasy really is. I always hear people talk about how bad it is, and I completely disagree. The combat is evenly paced with epic music and a fun campaign. Best game ever. Finally, a chance to talk about how bad Final Fantasy really is. I always hear people talking about how great it is, and I completely disagree. The Final Fantasy game is worse, and I hate it. The combat is terrible, evenly paced with bad music, bad music, and a terrible campaign. Worst game ever.
When I sit down to play a video game, I don't want to watch a movie. What is this? I spend the entire cutscene staring at a monster. Give me some freedom, Final Fantasy. Let me kill this thing that's in the cutscene.
The music's some of the best in the industry, and there's an entire world constantly dedicated to this music. The song Theme of Love is even taught to grade 4 students in Japan.
I'm a hater. You know what? It got me onto RPGs. I have to build my stats. Do you know how much time that wastes? Does it look like I have time to be able to build stats all the time? Stats here, stats there, stats here. No. You know what it done? It evolved me. It evolved me into MMOs. Do you think I want to play MMOs?
Huge thanks to everyone who took the time to join in, whether it was through the poll, the forums, or email, but a huge thanks to all the video responses. They were so good, in fact, I think we'll have to give away a Good Game shirt, and maybe even a coveted chicken pen to the best video, wouldn't you say, Hex?
Definitely. And I think that has to go to Mark Om this time for his brilliant puppetry.
But yeah, I'm saying fanboy overall.
What shall we do next time, Hex?
Well, we've done an Xbox one and we've done a PlayStation one, so we really should do something from Ninty, and if it's going to be Ninty, it may as well be this. The Legend of Zelda. Oh, look at this, limited edition, Ocarina of Time.
Fight!
Good game.
Do you have something to say to me, Miss Everett?
No. Dr. Styles, are you sure it's safe after what happened last night?
I'm not paying you to chitter-chatter. Lie back and close your eyes.
Grey Matter is the new game by a novelist and creator of the classic Gabriel Knight series, Jane Jensen. It's a point-and-click adventure game that follows part-time magician and super funky Samantha Everett, who has arrived in London from the US to seek out the infamous but very secretive Daedalus Club Society of Magicians.
But on her first night in town, her motorbike breaks down in a scary storm in front of the ominous Dread Hill mansion. And as luck may have it, you witness the intended new assistant fleeing in screaming fear from the doorstep in a weird cloud of smoke. Sneakily, you take her place and then score a bed for the night, but for some strange reason you decide that it might be a good idea to stay on as the new assistant.
Yeah, it's kind of like that scene in any horror film where you see a girl walking into the basement and the lights don't work and you're like, oh, come on, that's clearly not a good idea. I mean, the house is called Dread Hill and you just saw a woman running screaming in blind terror from it. But you do need the money to get your bike fixed, so after an awkward tutorial involving locating your lost rabbit, every magician needs one, you start to poke around.
Those gargoyles look like they were taken from an old building or something.
Through your snooping and sleuthing, you discover that your new employer is actually a neurobiologist. Another creepy thing you add to the list of reasons why you should leave immediately. You then make your way through some really beautiful rooms, inspecting objects and the architecture.
Now, this game is available on PC, but we reviewed the 360 version, and I have to say I had some real issues with this. This is just not the kind of game that I really want to play with a controller. Movement is awkward, using the thumbstick to control a cursor is just slow and annoying, and it has this radial menu which I just hated.
Agreed, but the art and the design are quite spectacular. Cutscenes have this wonderful painted quality, and this appearance is carried through in each room, which looks just like a landscape painting. Particular attention is paid to lighting, which sets the mood in each scene just perfectly.
So Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay.
I thought the character design was nice too, particularly with the lead protagonist, Sam. She has this cool alternative thing going on, and while some people might find her voice acting a little bit annoying at times, I quite liked her dry sense of humor.
This house is downright creepy. And I'm an ex-goth. I know creepy.
Your first assignment is to procure some test subjects for the creepy doctor, so you head to Oxford University to find some willing participants.
If you're free tonight, it's just an easy few hours for £15. Every student needs money, right?
However, you do have your own agenda to keep in mind also, so while out looking for victims, you begin solving riddles that will lead you ever closer to your secret magician society.
This is a Daedalus Club riddle. My first one.
Puzzles are your standard point-and-click fare. Hitting select or cycling through your radial menu will allow you to see the items you need to investigate. But some of the items are really well hidden or won't be labelled at all, so you have to do a fair bit of squinting into shadowy shapes or random blind clicking around to find the answer.
Nothing unusual. Looks like normal.
Also, a lot of clues come from conversation and investigating, so you need to talk to everyone and investigate everything. It's quite slow and arduous, but even information that may seem superfluous
It's a steam vent.
will later become useful.
I'll need to find something to help me open this, without it looking like I've opened it. Ouch! Hot!
It's good you have this double objective thing going on, because there's mystery in the trail of riddles that the Daedalus Club leave for you, as well as the creepy notion of what all this work for the Doctor is going to lead to.
One thing I did notice is that there wasn't really any hint system here, and I found that a little bit annoying. With time-consuming fiddly games like this, I completely respect that the challenge is in finding the answer through your own investigation. But sometimes the answer is something so small and easy to miss that you can spend forever looking in the wrong place.
And you know, when most of these games have hint systems, you get the option whether you want to use it or be left to your own devices, so there's no reason why you can't have one. I think that the game really shines through, though, when she uses her magics on other people in the game.
Yeah, I love that too. Amongst Sam's starting items, she has a deck of cards and a book of basic tricks, which you can use along with other items you need to collect to perform various illusions or sleight of hand to get what you need from people, or convince them to do something for you. And this really is fun, and part of the challenge is trying to figure out which trick applies to which situation.
And tricks require a fair bit of setup too. Sometimes you'll need to retrace your steps or shuffle and combine items, but you feel really crafty when you pull one off.
Yeah, and Sam is a bit of a crafty minx herself too. I mean, she spends half the game tricking everyone or lying to them about who she is or where she's from, and you can't help but wonder what the consequences are going to be. Final thoughts?
You can tell this has been written by a novelist. The story plays out like a book and has that real melodramatic quality to it. You also feel like you're in a mystery though, so I quite liked it, Hex. I'm giving it 7 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it too. A lot more than I thought I would, in fact. It felt like there was real risk involved, but a lot to be gained as well. I did get a little bit sick of scrolling through all of that long, drawn-out dialogue text, but I thought the story was compelling, and I actually found myself thinking about this game a lot when I wasn't playing it, which is always a good sign. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
You know what? Metal Gear is in my pile of the last PlayStation 3 Metal Gear. That one.
Snake, I'm counting on you. Terminate Liquid.
It's not over. Not yet.
I played for a while and visually it looked great, but I could never get into it and never get it completed.
This is my final mission.
Your body is approaching its limit.
How long do I have?
I'm normally a finisher completer with games. I have to just stay focused on it for a long period of time until I get it done, and that one, I just couldn't get through it.
Who's there?
Go away! I'm not done yet!
Yeah, it's still on my plate. I'll maybe start that one up again when I get back home.
Oh! Stop right there!
It's been a while since we looked at some of the downloadable games that have been popping up, so I think it's time for a roundup, Hex.
First up, Battle Los Angeles. Now, first of all, it's no surprise that a downloadable tie-in game for a schlocky movie is, well, rubbish. But this game seems to know that it's rubbish and kind of just roll with that. The cutscenes look like placeholders, the voice acting is terrible, the shooting is average at best. There's only 4 guns and 1 enemy, and it's shorter than the movie.
We're only half a click outside of the bombing zone.
It almost borders on being so bad it's good. Almost.
Yeah, it's really just so bad that it's bad. My first impressions were, this could be a bit of quick shooting fun, but no it isn't. The weird potato head aliens just aren't fun to fight, and putting the difficulty up to hard just gives them more hit points. The hit detection is also pretty bad, and more than a few times I was sure I'd scored a headshot, but no, didn't count. And once my rocket even went straight through a dropship.
There's no multiplayer or co-op either, so all you get is the shortest campaign in history with no real story or replay value. I mean, it's pretty below average in every respect. But, you know, it works and it looks passable, so I'm gonna give it 3.
It's powerfully below average. The best I can say about this game is that it mostly works, and it definitely makes you appreciate other shooters that are out there, so I'm giving it 3 out of 10 rubber chickens. Next up, Ghostbusters Sanctum of Slime. Hex, busting usually makes me feel good, and I was quite looking forward to this game because it's a top-down 4-player dual-stick shooter, but it's bad. There's some story here, it's told through long-winded comic panels, but the most I really got out of them was blah blah, you don't get to play as the actual Ghostbusters, blah blah, you're a bunch of rookies. And that just irked me. There's no voice acting in the game, so how hard would it have been to let me play as one of the actual Ghostbusters and not these nobodies?
And plus the gameplay is just archaic and dated. I mean, I love a good old school game, but there's just not that much fun to be had here. All you do is walk into a room, kill waves of ghosts, and repeat. I suppose there's some strategy in that there are 3 colours of ghosts and you have a corresponding weapon for each colour. But that's about as deep as it gets.
There is local and online co-op, but there's no drop-in, drop-out, so be warned, if you do manage to rope a friend in to play this game with you, they'll probably put the controller down halfway through, which forces you to restart the mission or just keep playing with a man down.
It's not a hard game, but it is infuriating at times. The AI are pretty good at healing you when you go down, but there's the odd enemy who can one-hit kill you, so you go down, a teammate comes to heal, he goes down, another teammate comes to help, they die, game over.
Yeah, once that had happened a few times, I just lost the urge to play this game completely. I admit that I had a bit more fun with Battle LA, so I'm giving this 2 out of 10 rubber chickens.
I think it's a little bit better than Battle LA, at least there's co-op and the comics are nicer, but it still only adds up to a whopping 3.5 from me.
Next up, Swarm, which I guess you'd call a platformer.
More of a score chaser.
Score chasing platformer.
Yeah.
The gist of it is Mama, a huge alien blob thing, crash lands on some planet and needs to be fed to get her back off the planet. She sends her swarmites out to gather resources for her, which are these shiny things that give you points.
Basically, you have to move the swarm through each level from left to right, while collecting as many shiny things as possible and always keeping at least 1 swarmite alive. Because as long as you still have 1, you can always spawn more by walking over nests, which are fairly frequent.
You'll need to make your swarm jump over stuff, spread out, group up, bash things, and my personal favourite, form a tower.
You'll have to reach a certain score in each level to unlock the next one, which isn't always that easy. The key to those high scores, though, is getting a big multiplier up, which you do simply by gathering the shiny things quickly or killing your swarmites, which comes quite naturally.
Yes, and they encourage you to let them die. There's always a few falling off ledges, getting burned, crushed, blown up, decapitated, electrocuted, and there'll often be collectibles that force you to sacrifice a few to reach them. Not to mention you actually get medals for killing them in specific ways, and it's funny.
Yeah, it's got a nice bit of character, and the Swarmites reminded me of those little aliens from Toy Story. It's punishing, but also rewarding, and it's fun, so I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, it's not a very deep game, but I did find myself going back to some old levels and trying for a higher score, so it's a bit of light-hearted fun. I'm giving it 7.5 out of 10 rubber chickens. And lastly, Dino D-Day. Hex, I admit, the moment I read the description for this game, I impulse added to cart. Just listen to it, if I may. Adolf Hitler has succeeded in resurrecting the dinosaurs. The reptilian horde has trampled Europe and the Mediterranean. Can nothing stop the Nazis' dinosaur army? Oh, what a description. And just look at the trailer. Fisticuffs with a T-Rex? You may have my money. But sadly, after about 20 seconds of playing this game, you realize what a terrible, terrible mistake you've made. For a start, when we bought the game, the trailer on the developer's website had all of this great stuff in it, but none of that's in the game. You can't have a fisticuff with a T-Rex or a Triceratops, which makes me sad. Plus, the game is way overpriced for what you get.
Yeah, this multiplayer-only shooter looks and plays like it's 10 years old. The Nazis have 3 playable types of dino. The Velociraptor, who is agile, and if you somehow manage to time a leap right, you can latch onto an enemy's face. Dilophosaur, who is a bit tougher but incredibly hard to control in the third person. And the Desmatosuchus, who is basically a small, flat dinosaur with a turret on top. They look funny and have a powerful weapon, but in a game about quick reflex shooting, none of these dinos can properly stand up to humans.
Kills my slobbery friend.
Yeah, and if you're on the Nazis' side, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose because all the dinosaurs are broken in some way. For example, I love the pterodactyl that you can use as a mortar if you're playing as a sniper, but it's actually really hard to hit anyone with it. Final thoughts?
Well, as odd as this is for me to say, it sucks that only Nazis get dinosaurs. I mean, I'm all for games like this that are trying to inject a bit of fun, but this was just too dated and broken for me to really enjoy it at all, so I'm giving it 1.5 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Hey, look, if you're going to play with dinosaurs in a World War II game, go with the classics. You've got to have those classic dinos in there. More importantly, Hex, they're obviously not up to date with the current findings on what velociraptors actually look like. They're covered in feathers. I'm giving it 1 out of 10.
So did you guess the game for this week? It was, of course, Sierra's Police Quest 3, The Kindred, which is now an impressive 20 years old. This point-and-click crime-cracking caper for PC was written by Grey Matter's creator, Jane Jensen.
If you would like to lay claim to these wonderful instruction manuals, you can do so via the Good Game forums or the Facebook page, or you can tweet us with the hashtag GGTV. We will also throw in a t-shirt.
Next week in the show, we'll be back on the battlefield with SOCOM Special Forces.
Plus, we pull out our PSPs in the dark for a bit of survival horror with the 3rd birthday. And there'll be some other stuff too.
Yeah, probably some other stuff.
Yeah, some other stuff.
Until next time, gamers, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Barjo out.
Why do you want to throw everything?